Welcome in. Today, we are taking you on a really fascinating deep dive into a structural catch-22 in international diplomacy.
Yeah, it's a situation where you really see the gears of global politics grinding against each other.
Exactly, because we're exploring what happens when the very resume that makes someone uniquely qualified to navigate a fractured, violent war zone
Right.
makes that exact same individual entirely disqualified in the eyes of global human rights
Yeah,
organizations.
it's a massive paradox.
It really is. And we are pulling all of our context today for you from a single source. It's a Wikipedia article detailing the career of a man named Mohammed Ahmed Mustafa al-Dabi. He is a Sudanese lieutenant general and intelligence officer who basically became the face of a profoundly controversial international mission.
And it's a remarkable case study. I mean, when you trace the trajectory of this one specific career, you're essentially looking at the hidden mechanics of how these institutions work.
Yeah.
This isn't just a biography. It's a real-time examination of how international bodies actually operate under intense pressure. You know, how they select their leadership, and that often irreconcilable friction between military pragmatism and human rights advocacy.
You really start to see how a single line on a resume can be viewed as, well, an indispensable asset by a government.
And a complete non-starter by an oversight committee. Exactly.
But before we start tracing that timeline for you, we do need to set a firm boundary for the deep dive you are about to hear.
Yes, very important context here.
Right. The source material we're working from today contains some incredibly heavy, politically charged accusations. We're going to be discussing the conflict in Darfur, as well as the crisis in Syria.
Which are both incredibly sensitive.
Deeply impactful allegations of state-sponsored violence. So I want to be entirely clear with you up front. We are not taking sides here.
No, not at all.
We aren't endorsing any of the specific viewpoints, political positions, or allegations mentioned. Our objective is strictly to unpack the claims, the quotes, and the defenses exactly as they appear in the original source text.
We are looking at the architecture of a geopolitical controversy. We're not sitting on a tribunal.
Exactly.
And that's a crucial baseline to establish. We're treating this text as an educational lens to just better understand the sheer complexity of international relations and institutional decision-making.
Okay, let's unpack this. To understand how Mohammed Ahmed Mustafa al-Dabi ended up at the center of this global firestorm, we really have to look at how his career was forged.
Right, where he started.
He was born in February of 1948 in Berber, which is a town located in the River Nile state of northern Sudan. And he eventually begins what becomes a 30-year career in the Sudanese armed forces.
A very long, very entrenched career.
Yeah, and the source points out a highly significant detail about his entry into the military. He enlists as a lieutenant in 1969.
Which tells you immediately about the political environment he was molded in. 1969 is the year of Ghaffar al-Numeri's military coup.
Right.
The one commonly referred to as the May Revolution.
So right out of the gate, day one of his military service aligns perfectly with the seismic shift in state power.
He learns the military apparatus during a period where the military is the supreme governing authority.
He stays in the armed forces, working his way up the ranks for 2 decades. And then we hit June 1989.
Another massive turning point.
There's another military coup in Sudan. This one is led by General Omar al-Bashir. And following this takeover, al-Dabi doesn't just survive the transition.
He is elevated.
He's appointed as the chief of Sudanese military intelligence.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you can see how his career foundation is completely intertwined with regime change and military consolidation.
Yeah, it's not a standard trajectory.
Not at all. He isn't ascending through some peacetime bureaucratic military structure. He is rising to the very top of the state's intelligence apparatus in the direct aftermath of a coup.
Which requires a very specific set of survival skills.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It positions him as a central, trusted figure in the new power structure. He's someone relied upon to secure the state during periods of extreme political volatility.
And the subsequent roles he takes on over the next decade really reflect that reliance. So from July 1995 to November 1996, he serves as the head of the foreign branch of Sudanese security.
Okay.
And immediately following that, from 1996 to 1999, he's made the deputy chief of staff for military operations.
And the text is very specific about what he did there.
Yes, it explicitly notes that in this capacity, he commanded Sudanese forces against the insurgency in the former southern Sudan.
Notice the duality of those roles.
Yeah.
First, he is managing foreign security threats, and then he just pivots directly to managing internal domestic military operations against an active rebellion.
Right.
This is an individual whose professional expertise is built entirely in the crucible of armed conflict and state preservation. He's commanding forces, he's managing intelligence, and he's executing tactical operations to suppress insurgencies.
Which perfectly leads us into the darkest chapter of his resume. And this is the primary reason his later diplomatic appointments become so fiercely contested.
The flashpoint.
We need to look at his assignment in Darfur. The source states that al-Dabi served as the presidential representative to Darfur from July to November of 1999.
And the scope of that role is critical.
Very. In this position, he was given full presidential jurisdiction over security, and he later returned to serve in that exact same capacity in 2004.
For anyone familiar with the history of the region, those dates and that specific title carry an immense amount of weight.
Yeah, they do.
As the presidential representative with full jurisdiction over security, he is not just a participant. He is the ultimate authority on the ground. He represents the central government's direct response to the situation in Darfur.
And this is the focal point of the accusations against him. According to the text, Sudanese rebel leaders have accused al-Dabi of severe human rights violations during the conflict in Darfur.
Now, we need to be very precise about what the source material actually claims regarding these accusations.
Right, because the details matter.
Because the evidentiary gap here is central to the later controversy you're going to hear about. His critics anchor their claims on his undeniable presence and authority.
He was there, and he was in charge.
Exactly. They argue that because he was the top-ranking military officer of the Sudanese army and the direct government representative with ultimate security jurisdiction during periods when massacres reportedly occurred, he holds responsibility. But, however, the text clearly states that there is no evidence that has been brought forth pointing to his direct personal responsibility for war crimes.
And that lack of direct evidence is a pivotal detail. But for the rebel leaders and international critics, the concept of command responsibility, the idea that the person at the top of the security apparatus must answer for the actions of that apparatus, that is enough to condemn his record.
It's the burden of leadership in that kind of conflict.
And the scrutiny wasn't entirely limited to his time in Darfur either. The source also includes a very stark warning from Amnesty International regarding his earlier tenure.
When he was the chief of military intelligence,
yes,
the Amnesty International report cited in the text paints a very grim picture of that specific era.
It does.
They stated that during the early 1990s, the military intelligence in Sudan, under his leadership, was responsible for arbitrary arrest and detention, enforced disappearance, and the torture or other ill treatment of numerous people.
Let's just take a moment to acknowledge the gravity of those specific claims. Enforced disappearances, systemic torture, arbitrary detention.
Yeah.
This is the institutional baggage attached to his name by one of the world's leading human rights organizations.
It creates a profoundly alarming profile for anyone looking through the lens of international human rights.
Right.
You have a commander, seasoned in counterinsurgency, holding ultimate security authority during a brutal conflict in Darfur, and leading an intelligence agency accused of severe systemic abuses.
Yet despite that profile, or perhaps because of it, his career takes a sharp turn into international statecraft.
A total shift.
He transitions from these hardened military and intelligence positions into formal diplomacy. He serves as Sudan's ambassador to Qatar from 1999 to 2004. And then years later, he is appointed as an ambassador of the Sudanese Foreign Ministry in August of 2011.
That pivot is really worth analyzing for you, the listener. Because why does a state take a military intelligence chief and rebrand him as a diplomat?
It's a great question.
Often, it is a way to project a certain type of strength or to manage sensitive regional security alliances where military pragmatism is actually valued over traditional diplomatic tact.
Right. They need an operator.
It creates a dual identity. To the international community, he holds the polished title of ambassador, but his underlying toolkit is that of a hardened general.
And here's where it gets really interesting. That dual identity sets the stage for a monumental collision in December of 2011.
The big moment.
Lieutenant General Mohammed Ahmed Mustafa al-Dabi is appointed to head the Arab League Observer Mission in Syria.
We have to contextualize what the Arab League was attempting to do here. By late 2011, the crisis in Syria was escalating rapidly.
Very rapidly.
The Arab League, functioning as the premier regional organization of Arab states, was attempting to intervene diplomatically. They were sending an observer mission into a highly volatile, violent environment to monitor the situation.
Essentially acting as the eyes and ears of the international community.
Exactly. And they selected al-Dhabi to lead it.
And the reaction to this selection was immediate, and it was uniformly stunned. The source details that his appointment was fiercely criticized by Syrian opposition activists, human rights groups, and a wide array of Arab and Western media commentators.
And the criticism wasn't just generic outrage, which is important to note.
No, it was highly specific.
The source provides distinct voices that articulate exactly why this appointment was viewed as a structural failure by the opposition. First, we have Abdelkarim al-Rahawi, the head of the Syrian League, speaking to the BBC. His argument centered on psychological alignment. He asserted that al-Dhabi would naturally sympathize with those in similar positions.
Wow.
Therefore, he argued, it would not be a surprise if al-Dhabi ended up supporting the Syrian regime, which was accused of committing crimes against humanity.
That is such a compelling angle. Al-Rahawi is suggesting that a general who spent his career suppressing internal dissent in Sudan is going to look at the Syrian government and see peers, not perpetrators.
He's going to view the conflict through the lens of state security, not civilian protection.
Exactly. And then you have Omar Adilbi representing the local coordination committees. Now, to give you some context, this was a vital grassroots network organizing the protests in Syria.
Yeah.
And Adilbi didn't mince words. He characterized al-Dhabi simply as a senior officer with an oppressive regime that is known to repress opposition.
So, for the grassroots activists on the ground, his institutional pedigree disqualified him entirely.
We also hear from Haytham Manna. He's a prominent Paris-based dissident. Manna urged the Arab League to either completely replace al-Dhabi or significantly strip back his authority.
And his reasoning introduces slightly different critique.
Yeah, he pointed to al-Dhabi's history, but also specifically cited his shallow experience in the area.
Which might sound contradictory at first to you, given al-Dhabi was an ambassador to Qatar.
Right, he had the title.
But Manna is highlighting a critical distinction in diplomacy. Being a conventional ambassador managing bilateral relations is an entirely different discipline than leading a high-stakes, fragile human rights observer mission in an active war zone.
It's totally different.
Manna is arguing that al-Dhabi lacked the specific, nuanced diplomatic toolkit required for conflict resolution.
And Amnesty International synthesized all of these fears into one overarching institutional warning. They argued that by appointing a Sudanese general, someone on whose watch severe human rights violations were allegedly committed, the Arab League was actively undermining its own efforts. They stated it seriously called into question the mission's credibility before it even began.
They are pointing out the inherent flaw in the Arab League's strategy. If the goal of an observer mission is to establish objective, moral oversight, placing a deeply controversial military figure at the helm neutralizes that moral authority instantly.
It's a massive risk.
It was a staggering institutional gamble.
And it is a gamble that unravels spectacularly. The source outlines a highly specific incident that acts as an accelerant to the controversy.
This is where it all comes to a head.
On December 28, 2011, the observer mission visits the city of Homs. Now, Homs was a major, intensely violent flashpoint in the Syrian conflict at that time.
Very dangerous area.
Shortly after the mission's visit, reports began circulating in the media claiming that al-Dhabi called the situation in Homs reassuring.
You have to consider the environment that word landed in.
Rish.
Yeah. Opposition groups were desperately trying to broadcast claims of severe state-sponsored violence occurring in Homs. For the head of an international observer mission to reportedly describe the scene as reassuring was devastating.
It completely validated their fears.
It perfectly validated every single pre-existing fear the activists had that he was there to provide diplomatic cover for the regime.
But the situation escalates way beyond the regional media. It actually draws in global superpowers. A few days later, the Russian Foreign Ministry releases an official statement on their website supporting al-Dhabi's alleged comment.
The geopolitical weight of that detail really cannot be overstated.
Right.
Russia had significant strategic interests in Syria and generally opposed international intervention. By officially amplifying and validating a reported offhand comment from the head of the Arab League mission, Russia weaponized al-Dhabi's words to legitimize their own non-interventionist narrative.
They used his credibility to push their agenda.
They used the credibility of his title to shape the global narrative.
And then we see the observer mission go into full damage control. They release a formal statement completely denying that al-Dabi ever made those comments. They unequivocally call the reports unfounded and not true.
We are looking at a classic information war here.
Yeah.
Whether he actually said it, was maliciously misquoted, or the quote was entirely fabricated, almost ceases to matter.
It doesn't matter anymore.
The operational damage was done. The mission's public perception was fatally compromised, and the controversy was now completely dominating the narrative.
And the pressure from this incident doesn't just stay in the media. What's fascinating here is that the controversy triggers a profound, very public schism within the Arab League's own organizational structure.
It fractures the institution itself.
Exactly. Two distinct opposing factions emerge regarding al-Dabi's leadership.
On one side, you have the executive leadership defending the appointment. Nabil al-Arabi, the Secretary General of the Arab League, steps up to publicly back al-Dabi. And al-Arabi's defense is really revealing. He describes al-Dabi as a capable military man with a clean reputation.
A clean reputation.
Right. He praises the initial performance of the mission and insists they need time to prove themselves on the ground.
It is such a jarring disconnect. You have Amnesty International pointing to a legacy of disappearances and torture, while the Secretary General of the Arab League points to a clean reputation.
It's entirely subjective based on their needs.
It demonstrates how an individual's career history can be interpreted in entirely contradictory ways depending on the priorities of the institution. Al-Arabi valued the pragmatism of a capable military man.
But that executive's defense could not contain the internal revolt. On the other side of the schism, you have the Arab Parliament.
Now, the Arab Parliament is an affiliated body of the Arab League. It functions as its legislative representative arm.
And when a legislative body publicly diverges from the executive leadership on a crisis mission,
It's bad.
it is an institutional earthquake.
The divergence was blistering. On January 2, 2012, Ali Salim al-Dikbasi, the head of the Arab Parliament, demands the immediate withdrawal of the observer mission.
Just pulls the plug.
He states that the mission had entirely missed its aim of stopping the killing of children. And he uses a phrase that cuts to the core of the entire controversy. He says the mission's presence gave the Syrian regime a cover to commit inhumane acts under the noses of the Arab League observers.
That is the ultimate nightmare scenario for any diplomatic intervention.
Yeah.
The accusation from within their own affiliated structure is that the mission is no longer just ineffective, it has become actively complicit.
Wow.
The Arab Parliament is validating the very critiques the grassroots activists made on day one. They are declaring that under al-Dabi's leadership, the mission is doing more harm than good.
The convergence of pressure is just overwhelming at this point. You have Syrian opposition groups, international human rights organizations, global media, and now a mutiny within the Arab League's own legislative branch, all demanding an end to his tenure.
You can't survive that.
Yeah. No. The chronological narrative in the source wraps up very swiftly after this internal fracture.
Because an institution can only sustain that level of friction for so long before something breaks.
And the breaking point arrived on February 12, 2012. Mohammed Ahmed Mustafa al-Dabi submitted his resignation from the Arab League observer mission.
Think about that timeline for a second. After decades of navigating the perilous waters of state security and military coups, his tenure on the international diplomatic stage lasted barely a month.
Barely a month. So what does this all mean for you, the listener? We followed the arc of a man who spent 30 years building a formidable career within the uncompromising environment of Sudanese military intelligence.
Right.
He commanded forces, managed internal security during brutal conflicts, and survived multiple shifts in national power. He possessed a very specific, very hardened skill set.
Then, that exact skill set was grafted onto a delicate, highly visible international human rights mission.
And the resulting friction essentially tore the mission apart.
He became a global flashpoint. His entire operational history was weaponized against the very mission he was sent to lead, which culminated in a rapid and highly publicized resignation.
It really leaves us with a profound structural dilemma regarding how these global institutions operate.
It absolutely does. And building on the mechanics of this case study, here's something I want you to think about. How do international organizations navigate the impossible catch-22 of crisis intervention?
That's a tough question.
On one hand, to effectively monitor an active war zone, you arguably need seasoned, experienced military diplomats, people who understand the grim realities of armed conflict and can look a general in the eye.
They need that grit.
But on the other hand, To maintain the trust of the global community and the victims on the ground, you require leaders with unblemished, unquestionable human rights records. So how do institutions bridge that gap? Can they ever find a seasoned military insider who is simultaneously viewed as a flawless champion of human rights? Or are these types of observer missions fundamentally doomed to compromise from the very moment they select a leader?
That is definitely something for all of you to keep in mind the next time you see an international envoy appointed to a crisis zone. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Your curiosity and willingness to explore these complex global paradoxes is what makes this show possible. Until next time, keep questioning the narratives, keep learning, and we will catch you on the next one. Take care.